Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome to Let's Play. And today we are going to be talking about the writing for the Cyberpunk 2077 expansion Phantom Liberty with a very, very special guest, the story director and lead writer for Phantom Liberty, Tom Marchewka. Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited.
Same here. And first, I wanted to say congratulations because I know Phantom Liberty's been getting a lot of love. We're recording this in the middle of award season, and I know Phantom Liberty got nominated for Best Narrative and also Best Ongoing Game at the Game Awards. And I believe you also won 2 Golden Joysticks for Best Trailer and Best Expansion, I believe. So congrats on that.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to everyone that support us and that basically enjoyed the game because yeah, this is what it is for. I'm very happy that we could send out the game that gave so much fun to many people and also got critically acclaimed.
Totally. So yeah, I wanted to go. Why don't we start with your role specifically in Phantom Liberty, and can you talk a little bit about, for people who aren't maybe don't know, like what your role was and what sort of things were you doing during development?
Sure. So for Phantom Liberty, I was both the associate story director and a lead writer, and it pretty much gives a good glimpse of what I actually did during the development because I had to work on two levels in parallel. Like one of them is the creative vision level, where you need to work with the narrative director, quest director, cinematic director, as well as game director, of course. And this is art directors. Basically, as one of the directors, you need to come up with the cohesive vision of what the product, we can call it the game is going to be about. So basically, you need to have a creative vision that's going to be followed on every level, and like every stakeholder here, meaning like every director needs to add some takes care of their own expertise target of expertise. And as a lead story writer, I was also leading a writer's room, which was directly responsible for designing story for Quest together with Quest designers, cinematic designers, like the whole narrative department, as well as being responsible for the dialogues written for the game. So I had to connect those two functions into one and be both on the level of direction as well as on the level of directly supervising dialogues written. And I also wrote some of the dialogues and quests for the game as well.
Well, how are all the writers organized? And like, are you guys like meeting every day in sort of like that sort of brainstorm kind of TV show type environment? Or is there a lot of like individual writing and reviewing?
It's kind of mixed for Phantom Liberty because writer is both a member of a writer's room in terms of like we talk about story arcs, character arcs, like you need to tell a cohesive story. So that means the characters you're writing dialogues for, like you set up something in the beginning of the game and you want to work on the payoff and you need to understand what the whole story is about. And we do that together, like we're coming up with the characters, with subplots and so on. At the same time, when you're writing dialogues for a specific quest, you're a member of a team connected to that quest. So those are like many different expertises connected, many different departments. So you've got level designers there, environment designers there, quest designers. Like I don't want to, I wouldn't like to forget about anyone, but basically there's a group of people making a quest together, and you need to connect those both worlds. As a writer, you're responsible for the bigger scheme of story. As a member of a content team, you work on a specific quest or specific quest divided into many content teams. So you need to be a part of those both worlds as a writer.
With Phantom Liberty, you're dealing with like an established game world with like the larger game, but also with all the cyberpunk lore that was written by Mike Pondsmith and others with the tabletop RPG. So when you start an expansion like Phantom Liberty, are you given very specific guidelines to follow when you actually start the project?
Kind of both yes and no, because you need to fit the world you're working with. So with Cyberpunk, we knew that it's going to be the world of Cyberpunk 2077, or like the whole IP of Cyberpunk. You know that there are specific ground rules connected to the characters, to the like mythology of that specific world. At the same time, we wanted to find something different. We wanted to find something original. With Phantom Liberty, it connects both to having a new district as well as exploring a new genre. because we knew that we would like to explore something which is cohesive in terms of the genre, and we wanted to go for a spy thriller. And it's also exploration of what spy thriller can bring into the world of cyberpunk, like both to the genre, like cyberpunk as a genre, and to cyberpunk as the IP we're working on, like the specific type of cyberpunk we're working on. So you're both tied by kind of a restrictions of the world you've built in the during the previous release. At the same time, you want to bring something new to the table and to expand and play with the expectation as well.
Great. And was there a lot of debate when you were starting like conception for the project in terms of like where and when it would take place? Were there other ideas that you considered that kind of came close to becoming into play or not?
I think like we knew that we were going for the Night City, and that like we looked for different possibilities how to expand Night City into something which you haven't seen yet, and Dogtown is a result of that. Like of course, in every development, you've got few ideas fighting for your attention, fighting for people's hearts, for what is the most exciting thing that you can do for the audience and for yourself as a creator. So it is always a part of creative process. I think ultimately, like it was also about the different versions of the same plot, and at some point we found out that the most exciting part of it for us is going for the spies. Like we asked ourselves, what's the most exciting part of it, and we decided, well, we want to say that there is some kind of a system outside of Night City, and that system is the federal government, or like the new United States of America, and that's something which is it's not intuitive to think that there's such an entity as a nation in Cyberpunk 2077, because we said corporations are leading the world, like they are the ones that set the rules, but there are other entities, and they are also it's counterintuitive, but they are weaker than corporations, but they have some aces up on the sleeve, like they have some joker cards, and the trumping card is in this instance is the spy game. So they've got spies, and the FIA, Federal Intelligence Agency, is one of them. Like those guys could have been Morgan Blackhands of this world, but they decided they're gonna go for the idea instead of fame and money, and that was something that I've got goosebumps when I speak about it. So it still works. It still works when I say
Totally.
Morgan Blackhands of this world. So like it works for me, and it worked for many people there. So we decided, yeah, this is the exciting part that we would like to tell the story about.
Yeah, no, I think the spy thriller aspect of it meshes so well with the cyberpunk genre. And I think like so much about the game is about like the different factions and all the different gangs and the different corporations that kind of, and like the nomadic clans. So having like government agencies kind of fit into there too, with their own sort of agendas and kind of like way they pull the strings behind the scenes, it fits in like perfectly, I think.
It's also about people forgotten by the system, because
Yeah.
those were the people fighting for a change, and when they failed, the system left them. And this is about and that fits the cyberpunk genre, but it's also kind of unexpected. Like when you look at the story of Phantom Liberty, it is a story of people who sacrificed everything to make the change, and the system failed to help them, failed them at the worst possible moment. And this is also like the emotional background that, like, it plays well with the spy thriller, but it's something different from what we did in the main game, because there we showed people who never agreed to be part of the system. But what happens if you fight for the system that forgets about you? That's also very, I think that's moving.
Definitely, yeah. And like with the spy genre, obviously, like there's a lot of more like obvious kind of points of inspiration. Like, you could look at like James Bond and like Mission Impossible, but I'm curious, are there any other kind of sources of inspiration or influence that you specifically look to as a writer when you're coming up with the story and the characters?
Like that's the very strong point for me, because I deliberately insisted on like looking past the genre. Like what we did was we checked the actual information about the spies out there, like whatever is available, because it's difficult, but there are books written about it. For example, you can read books written by former spies. Like you can check how does it work in the real world. Like how do you recruit a spy? Like most people know how do you recruit a spy because they saw a movie, but if you check in the real world, how do you recruit a spy? It's a bit different. So we poked and checked what's available, like what books were written about it, maybe some movies, and like we cross-referenced where movies are faithful and where they are not. Movies, books, like any piece of pop culture. I say movies because it's intuitive, but basically where pop culture meets with the reality, but we wanted to expand. So like I think I know some things about spy operations that are, they are publicly known, but basically I spent a year or more than a year reading mostly about covert operations that were given out to public and researching the real world situation of spies, and then coming back to the cyberpunk, we decided, and then let's filter it through pop culture. So then let's tell different type of spy story, because there are different spy stories. Some of them are about explosions, changing identities. They're very visually attractive and very dynamic. There are some psychological thrillers about it. So like cabin fever, like when you can't trust, like you cannot trust anyone, when you're alone and you're second guessing if you're still yourself because you were so long undercover for such a long time that you don't know who you really are. And like we tried to list the possible, well, it's not that methodical, but you try to list down the different possible filters for the spy story and include them as quests. One of the quests is about the deep psychological battle between different agencies. The other is more like a action sequence about you being in danger and running away from your enemies. And those different phases were also like then full of real life experience, because what you need to do, you need to understand what would build the characters you're telling the story about in the real world, like live it, like you try to live it through like they were, like you're them, like you try to gather their experiences. Imagine how they were recruited, how their life would go if they were in the spy, and so on and so forth. And when you got it, you forget about it, and then you write dialogues for them. And this is what makes them real, that they are no longer a set of directions or a character sheet, but you spend some time to actually try to enact what would happen if you were them, and then you give them the voice. So that's I know I'm all over the place, but that's a complex
No, it's all
process,
good.
and I try to sum it up quite briefly.
No, I totally agree. I think like the psychological aspect of the being a spy and being like a government agent like that is to me like the most fascinating, because yeah, you already touched on a lot of it, but that idea of like, how your loyalty is always kind of being tested, and not only with your agency, but with, your team members. And I think that's what's so cool about Phantom Liberty, is that's always in play with every interaction with all the members of the team. You're constantly like, oh, am I going to get double crossed? And there's people who feel like they've been double crossed, but they're still loyal to each other because, they just have that bond, or they feel responsible for each other. And I just love how it's always like playing with those different dynamics and relationships.
Yeah, it has to be a tragic story of people who need to fight for values in the world where they cannot trust on values, because everyone betrays everyone, and not because it's a spy genre, but because the situation like is like impossible to be solved otherwise. So that's tragic story of people who have no choice, basically.
Yeah, so let's get into the characters specifically, because I think that's such a huge driver for Phantom Liberty. And yeah, I'm just curious, like what characters did you kind of like really, really enjoy writing for? Were there any that kind of like stuck out, specifically like, like Solomon Reed and Songbird and Alex and those people?
Oh my God, all of them, all of them, and like I can't choose just one, because what's cool about those characters is the dynamics between them. Like they do not work, like of course they do as an abstract, but it's I really do not have a favorite one, because I like something about each and every one of them. So that's I think it's impossible to answer. Like that's an honest answer. Like it's impossible for me to choose just one. Like it was just a pleasure to work with such a cool cast of characters. Like I think I'm really proud of what we managed to to do here in terms of how close they are in terms of emotional relationship to each other, like how they would really like to trust and like each other, and how they cannot because of the situation. But as I say, it's a social dynamics, and in terms of specific character traits, I think I like every one of them. So it's difficult. Just a small personal sympathy for Alex. Like I really like her.
Yeah, I love Alex. I think in general the character introduction specifically for Alex, for Reed, and for Songbird are so they're so great because they're not like showy. There's not like a big like explosion of like set pieces going on, but they're so intense and they really leverage I think the first person perspective so well. Can you talk a little bit about how those kind of came to pass? Because I think individually they're all very unique and interesting, but it's like the intensity that I think really sticks out for those how they're introduced.
It's partially because you mentioned first person perspective, and you write differently for first person than like, at least I do. I remember like switching from Witcher 3 to Cyberpunk 2077, and one of the and most people think it's about that you're the camera and you can like choose where you should look at. So most places that are like possibility for you to look at that they should be attractive, and that's true in terms of cinematics and art, but also it's different when you have to make the decision staring right into the barrel of the gun than just looking at your character staring at the gun pointed at you. It's different. So you try to go to the intensity with the possible tools, but not also visually, but psychologically. So there are going to be spoilers here. So for anyone
Yeah,
who haven't
yeah,
played
we
the
can go
game,
there.
I'm gonna be putting some spoilers right now. But when you think about it, like when you meet Reed, he sticks a gun to your ribs, and it's subtle because you just look for a second, but after a second you understand that you can't do much and you cannot move, and the restriction of movement is an actual suspense builder in that scene. It's not only about what they say, but it's written with the intention that you cannot really move and you feel the gun on your ribs, and you know that anything can happen in a second. It's the same with meeting Alex. Like within seconds, the gun is pointed at you and you cannot do much. It turns out you can, but still, it's a different conversation when you're staring at someone who is desperate and you don't know what's going to happen in a second. It was similar with the negotiation with Royce in the main game. Like I remember writing that one because I was at one point responsible for dialogues for that one, and keeping it at the same time you need to keep it real in the way that you still believe that you have some things you can do. So it's not just pushing a movie or a sequence. You do not wait for the things to happen. You still have initiative. You still have motivation to do stuff. But at the same time, you feel the actual danger and the consequence of any action you're going to take. And I think that the introduction of characters in Phantom Liberty is also built around that purpose, that whenever you meet someone and we intended for danger, you feel the actual tension and danger. And at the same time, you know you've got some options, but you don't know what they're going to lead to because you're also tackling professionals and they know what they're doing and you're not their first job.
And when you're writing those scripts, how much of the visual aspect of the scene are you writing in there? Because I know obviously I'm sure there's a lot of overlap with like character designers and concept artists and quest designers and things like that. But like are you writing like blocking like how they're moving through the spaces? Are you writing like what they're wearing? I think specifically for Songbird, when you first meet her, she's kind of like, she's a digital projection, similar to Johnny Silverhand, and she has her like Netrunner outfit. And then later in the game, when you meet her in person, she looks very different. So I'm just curious, like how much of that is in the writing, or is there kind of like a mix?
You've mentioned one specific thing that was like we really put a lot of attention to plan it well. So like the whole idea was that you think that you're having the conversation with a human being in a trap, and that the part of her being, just a young girl in trouble is very important. Like you see someone who seems innocent, like she was dragged into it. And when you meet her in person and you see how much chrome she has on herself or in herself, this is the moment when you actually realize two things. One thing is what was done to her, and that she is escaping from something bigger than you expected. Like that it changed her in a way that cannot be undone. At the same time, you start having like you start asking questions. Is it fake? Because like you showed yourself, you portrayed yourself as a young girl, and in your head you maybe are, but maybe that's a tool that you're using. So the moment of seeing her should be shocking for you. And I think for many people it is, because I saw people playing that without knowing what's going to happen, and they were like, wait a second, and some of them even gasped like, what, like how what's happening? So that was planned like on the level of a big picture of a story. But in terms of scenes, like we work really closely with quest design department and cinematic design department. So, and it's an iterative process. Like we start with providing some feed for them, like we provide some script, which may or may not include the movement, the possible actions, actionable items, and so on. And here comes the like cooperation with Quest cinematic designers. I think mostly cinematic designers who they really push us towards actions, towards what can happen on screen, what can you do, what your character can do, what can be cut out of the dialogue, and instead of be said, just be shown. So show not tell is one of the rules, but also what props can we use to bring the emotion out, because it's never props for the props sake. Like we really try to avoid just doing nice things to be, you know, sparkling on the screen. Like that is not the way. We always ask ourselves, what's the dominant emotion in the scene? So what do you want to convey with that specific scene? And we try to use visual tools and like maybe even I would call them specific motion that would give you that emotion. So as we talked about Reed, we got a scene when we want you to feel pressed, and it started with him just telling you that he's got a gun pointed at you. It ended up with him shoving a gun into your ribs in a visceral way. Like you can feel it when your character moves, that it hurts, that it's not that he holds you and you cannot move, and the restraint is out there. And it's also it's back and forth. Like we write something, it's being adapted to movement. We sit down together, we discuss, we're directing the scene, or cinematic designers are directing the scene with their dialogues. And after the back and forth, of course, there's also a moment of review by the directors and so on. But the gist of it is it's a cooperation between departments to put it into moving interactive thing.
Since you brought up Reed, let's talk a little bit about him specifically. So I'm curious because obviously with Cyberpunk, you have some really big name actors in it performing the roles like Keanu Reeves and Idris Elba and among others. I'm curious, as a writer, does that change at all your process? And specifically with Solomon Reed, was that character written with Idris Elba in mind, or did he come on later? And if he came on later, did that sort of change anything from a writing perspective?
I think it's impossible to say, because you cannot not be excited. Like you are excited when you know who's on board. And like with both Keanu Reeves and Idris Elba, we knew who's going to be on board. So like you know who you're writing for. And like it starts with a script and it starts with a character, because it's not that it's character written for the specific actor, but it's a part of the bigger story. But at some point you know who you're going to be writing for, and then it's a blur, because our writing process is also iterative. So like the story evolves with quest, it evolves with gameplay, it evolves with during the review process. So it's not as you've got a script and you just need to adapt that script to a video game. It's more complicated than that. So at some point you just know that you're gonna have a tremendous name to have that role, and for sure that affects you emotionally because you're excited, but it's a little bit of both.
And with Johnny Silverhand specifically, I know that his relationship with V, it's very central to the main game and how that kind of evolves over time. And he's very prominent in Phantom Liberty. I'm curious, how did you want to explore that relationship further? Like, how did you want to sort of, I guess, expand on what you had already built with the relationship between V and Johnny Silverhand in Phantom Liberty?
For sure, we knew that we would like to have something meaningful for Johnny, and knowing that we're going to be going for the spy thriller, and most importantly for people working for the system, we suddenly remembered that Johnny was in the army. Like it's also something that when V hears about Johnny serving for some time and then running away, he's like, "You were in the army? Like what caused you to go there?" Like it doesn't seem real. Like you're not this type of guy, and we needed to explore what caused Johnny to go there and what it did to him, like how it changed him and what it tells him about the system and about people. and that turned out to play very, very well with the whole plot, because he's got his take on pretty much everyone because he met this type of people in his past. And of course, Johnny has a take on everything. Like if you ask him, he has a take on everything. But this is more than just him being witty. It's about his personal story, because it also, although he doesn't like to admit it, it touches him on a personal level, because maybe there might be a question, maybe they do what you were not up to because you were too weak, for example, not loyal enough. Or maybe you were the wiser guy. Maybe you were the one that looked through the emblems and decided to be free. And that it seems a simple question, but it's not as easy like when you have to judge what you did in the past, as Johnny did. And we thought that this is worth exploring, and I think that it ended up with a meaningful character arc for him as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the setting of Dogtown, because I think it's very, very unique. And it's interesting because when when you download the DLC and you kind of see the extra section on the map, you're like, oh, okay, this is probably like another neighborhood or something. And then you go there and it's really like a completely different world. So I'm very curious, how did that kind of come about? What sort of things were you influenced by or trying to explore with just the Dogtown setting in general?
Sure, but first, let me ask you a question. Like, what were you surprised by the most looking at Dogtown?
I think it felt a lot more dense and in like a different way. Like Night City is impressive because it's like sprawling and you can see like all the highways and these massive buildings and these badlands. But when you go to Dogtown, it's almost like a little bit of a claustrophobic effect where there's just buildings just like piled on top of each other. There's a lot more, I think like the downtrodden aspect of it is a lot more like palpable because you can see like, cars stacked on top of each other and like people just really like smushed together. And I just love the whole aspect of it. It kind of looks like if Las Vegas got like bombed and then it got taken over by, like a military dictator or something like that. It just had like a very, very specific character. And like, if you told me that was in like another part of the country, like I would have totally believed it. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot there.
I'm asking because I'm looking for clues of what I'm gonna like talk about, because I think we approach the topic from many different angles, but for me, two are the most important. I remember meeting with one of our art directors, and we talked about the most dangerous district in Night City, and the intuitive thing about it is that it's gonna be with people fighting each other, with gangs and so on. So because it's a dark, cruel world of dark future. And I remember that I was first, we need to find something real for Dogtown, because it always starts with things that are real with us. And apart from the spies, I also read tons about how do you become a gang member, for example, or what makes you go on the streets, because it's not as obvious. Like most people think that when you shoot at someone, video games, those are orcs, goblins, whatever. You shoot at them, they die. But the very important question is, how did they end up on the street? And I remember reading some stories about Brazil, South America in general, but also like about different difficult places around the world. And I understood that it all starts with you getting a gun from someone. Like first you stand on the corner and you need to whistle if something happens. Then you get a gun. And if you manage to survive for a month, you're going to get a bulletproof vest. Of course, it's a metaphor. Basically, this is how it works. And you're getting more and more stuff because they trust you more. And it's about earning trust. And it's about building layers of the criminal group, basically. And that ends up being a gang. But we also wanted a gang which is somehow connected with the whole social environment, a gang which is taking care of their own. And we didn't want to make just a simple dystopia. We wanted to do something more. We wanted to base on real stuff where gangs are integral parts of the society and when they're important. And this is how we filtered it through the cyberpunk lens of extreme things, that we should have a group of former Militech operators who they were forced to stay in Night City, and suddenly you're in the middle of the enemy territory with tons of prototype stuff, and you're just sitting there like ducks. What do you do? And what they did was quite unexpected. They started a part of the city, like they gave out guns. they knew how to do it. They had contacts all over the world, and this is how they organize stuff around themselves. But there's also, and that's the first angle, the I think more obvious one, which is how do you create a militia which is going to be leading a part of the city without making them dystopian villains, with giving them some kind of identity of taking care of their own. And that was a part of it. The second part of it was a question: what do you do in Night City when you cannot afford the rent? And I was like, you find a place where you do not have to pay the rent, and you can steal electricity. And the only way to the prerequisites to get your own like flat or something is find a place which is empty, be able to defend it, steal some electricity, and make it bearable. And this is also what's visible in Dogtown, because it's not only military district led by a group of badasses who, you know, basically used to be special forces of Militech. It's not that easy. What's also there is the layer of people who either escaped Night City because this is the only place where NCPD, gangs, corporations couldn't get them. But the second part is they just couldn't afford living in Night City, so they moved there. So it's a land of freedom, so to speak. And that also corresponds to the people that were betrayed by the system. So on the very basic level, the Dogtown as society is also a commentary similar to what we do with the spy genre. And I think this is subtle, but what you said about, you know, different layers and how dense it is, it wouldn't be like that. That would be just a simple dystopia led by people with guns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what makes them effective, just members in that society, is that there are a lot of parallels between, you know, the quote unquote villains and the people that are on your side. So you can kind of see like the blurred lines between their motivations and things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we always go for the shades of gray. And it's also a district started by betrayed people. The leader is the guy who was sent to Night City on a mission. And when the mission failed, they called him and told him, you know, bye, like you're on your own right now. And what he did is something absolutely unexpected, but it still is, like, as you say.
So I know CD Projekt Red, y'all take a lot of player feedback into consideration. So I'm curious, from a story perspective, what did you learn in the base game of Cyberpunk 2077 that you wanted to, or that you were able to apply when you were developing the story for Phantom Liberty?
That's very tricky because on the level of writing a story, I think it's tricky because at the same time, I think, at least me as a consumer, I expect things that I like, obvious, but at the same time, I expect the creator to play with my expectations. Like whenever someone plays with my expectations, I feel tricked in a positive way. So my ambition as a writer, as a story director, is to play with people's expectations, to give them what they want, but not in the way they expect. And I hope that we manage to do so with Phantom Liberty, and that kind of spy genre kind of ties into that way of thinking. At the same time, we knew that we would like to incorporate important choices, like that's something we always do. But we know that players expect meaningful choices. They expect big consequences of those choices. So it's a kind of, we try to do the same stuff we used to do, but better and in a more meaningful way, or as well as we usually try to. So, but I think like we double checked if we are giving you enough of the interactive experience, as much of interactive experience as we can. And of course, as you mentioned, also one of the big takeaways is that we're still learning. So, for example, you mentioned, and I think that's the best example, the character introductions. I think that the way they are directed, how interactive they are, in the way where you meet those characters and different things happen, is also on pushed to another level, because we know our craft better than we used to. So I hope that those things also get better along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think you feel that when you're playing it. When you're writing a game that obviously incorporates so much player freedom and all these different choices and branching paths, what does that actually like look like on a technical level? Like, are your scripts not traditional looking scripts? Are they more like kind of like flow charts where they're mapping out all the different possibilities? I'm just curious, like, what does that kind of look like?
It's actually both, because when you're writing a script, it is a typical script. Like you can print it out in a way where it looks like a classic movie script. At the same time, the way it is visible for us, it is a flowchart. So you have we call it a section. So you got a block, and that block contains, for example, 5 to 10 lines of text. And after that, you have a choice, which is another block connected by a string. And on that block, you've got only 5 choices or 4 choices or 3 choices. You click one of them and it goes to block, block, block. So like you've got connected blocks connected by strings, and we click on those blocks and going through flowcharts, every block expands into a page of text or a few pages of text. So you can print it out in PDF file basically, and it's going to be looking like a script with inserted choices. And of course, they're going to be either chronologically or however you want. You can sort it out on the page. At the same time, we work in a script which is both the flowchart and the classical page.
Gotcha. Now I'm curious because I've heard you say in the past that when you play games like story-driven games like this, you don't necessarily put your mind in the headspace of the character. You try to kind of treat the protagonist and make choices that what makes sense for like their character arc as you kind of see it. So that made me think of like, for you, when you play Phantom Liberty, do you have a path or an ending that kind of just resonates specifically or that just made the most sense for you? I'm super curious about that.
I do not, because I cannot distance myself from this story. Like, we're always telling ourselves, I can have a favorite one, but it's not the most resonating one. And I think it resonates with me because of my personal experience. There are some tropes that are the closest to me because of my experiences as a human being. But the strongest direction we have, and I also like give it to all the writers and like all the narrative departments, remember about it. There's no golden path. There's no such thing as the best way to play that story. And if you start thinking in that way, you failed in terms of non-linearity. So you need to design everything in a way where every possible version should be your favorite. And that's difficult. And for sure, it's not going to end up that way, but I couldn't just tell you. For example, when you ask me that question, absolutely, like I'm going to be absolutely honest. I have highlights of that story that I like the most, but they do not add up to a cohesive playthrough. This is not like, you know, from left to right. You should play the story that way. No, I've got the favorite moments which are like they touch me. That I feel happy or sad or angry or whatever. Like they evoke emotions, but it's not like they add up to a cohesive way of playing a game.
Were there any moments or like really highly debated kind of points in when you with your writers when you were kind of coming up with this story that, you know, that was just like highly debatable, or you were really like struggling with like whether to put something in or not, or have something go a certain way, or were there anything that didn't make it into the final game that might have been interesting, and maybe to be cut for some other reason?
It's a difficult question because, you know, this is the everyday stuff. Like if the story doesn't move you, it's not worth telling. So there's tons of stuff that it was that had discussion around it, because, you know, you if you're talking about serious emotions and serious people and you want it to feel real, I think one of the difficult things is to write stuff that is sad and that ends up in a way that you don't want it to. I remember one of the Polish writers say, I won't bring it out like with the titles and everything, because, you know, it's not very well known thing, but I remember one writer saying that he was writing an ending of his book and he was crying because he didn't want the character to end up that way. And I think this is what you should do. You should be honest while writing. If you feel bad because you wrote that scene, that works. That works, and being out of your comfort zone is your this is what you should do. Like this is the way of doing that if you want to move people, if you want to give them something valuable. If you're not honest while you're writing, you're doing that the wrong way. So there was tons of discussion about different stuff, because sometimes you don't like yourself for doing that to characters, and it's never about misery for itself. It's always about working with a specific trope, like, you know, the fall of Icarus or whatever. Like you want to have something that that plays well as a commentary on something, as a piece of culture that's going to be cohesive within how it plays with the trope, with the stuff that was done before. or that comments on the specific flow of character, because I love talking about flows of characters because characters are as interesting as their flows. So basically you want to expand on the targeted stuff, and sometimes you just know it has to end that way. It's not about, killing characters or doing something bad to them because that evokes emotion. This is just the what it takes to tell a proper story, and you need to deal with that. So yeah, there are always discussions, and about stuff that you need or do not need to cut out of the game. That's also mundane because you work within the specific time frame with a specific scope, and sometimes it's not about how things were done, but basically how much of the stuff we have ideas about can be done within the specific time frame, and why it's doable or not. So there is not a big controversy like anywhere here. It's just like stuff gets cut out, and this is what happens with the project of that scale if you're not planning it from the beginning till the end and just adapting the script. And even then, I know from the movie industry that even then it's not as easy because there's editing and there are changes during shooting and so on. So whatever you do, and editing a book is the same. Like I wrote 2 novels, so yeah, it's not as you expect in the initial draft.
Totally, yeah. It must be so hard. Made me think of my guy Jackie Wells. And even when I was playing it, I was just like thinking like, oh man, if I was writing this, like when you have a character that you like is so endearing, like I totally see like, oh yeah, you want to like, it hurts that much more when you take them away, but at the same time you're like, oh, can we keep him around like a little bit longer?
I call him my son because I gave so much. Like Jackie, I think Jackie is the character I've worked on the most in the whole game. So basically, I like the scene where he's killed is I wasn't writing that, but I was responsible for writing dialogues for the earlier part of the story when you meet Jackie, and and coming up with the story of the son of Haywood who was beaten by his father, like because the crucial part about Jackie is that he's son of his father. Like when you look at the quest when Jackie is killed, like it's a story about 2 sons. It's a story about Yorinobu Arasaka, who didn't want to be son of Saburo Arasaka, and Jackie Wells, who didn't want to be the son of Raoul Wells. And this is why it strikes so hard, because when you understand that Jackie tried to never go back to the apartment in Haywood where he's beaten by his father and he has to protect his mom. And Yorinobu never wanted to be in the apartment that Jackie admires. Like this is, it might be on the subconscious level, but this is when you understand that happiness takes something different than those guys try to aim for. And Jackie was ready to give his life for that, and he did. So yeah, that's especially close to me because it costs a lot to kill this type of character. Yeah. Weird.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, and a fan of Hemingway too. You find out later.
Oh, you find out that yes. That's me.
Oh, nice.
That's my. I can say it's my idea. I wanted to have for whom the bell tolls there, because we were looking for a way to show that Jackie is not as simple as he looks. And the quote that's being read directly from the book is about why he's always laughing and he's always making fun of stuff. That's his way of coping with reality. It's not like this is a simple guy who's always happy and everything is so cool. It's not. And when you find that book and you find that quote, you understand why he's doing so, and that like deeply inside he's a guy who understands more than he shows on the outside. I even remember it was very cool. We were recording Polish voiceovers for Jackie with one of the Polish actors, and he was asked by the director to play a dialogue in a specific way. And I remember that actor saying, "Let me try it one more time," because Tom said this guy reads Hemingway, and guy who reads Hemingway wouldn't say it in that way. I need to try it one more time because we need to remember this guy is wired differently. He's just pretending. And so let me try that scene one more time. And I was like, yes, this is what we aimed for.
Yeah, I think it's such a good sign of a really great and deep character when, even when they're gone from the story, technically, their kind of shadow like looms over really the whole story as you continue to play. in like different little moments. Obviously, you have like the whole like funeral quest, which was really great. But even like I love like the little moments like where you can call his phone and like leave a voicemail for him, and it's just so cool. And even how it like kind of feeds into little choices that you can make in various quests. It's just really effective.
I'm glad to hear. Like, yeah, that's I can't help that. Like, I've got no distance in terms of like I cannot distance myself from Jackie. That is one of the personal moments for me in the game where I've tried to go all out and basically give whatever I can to the character. I think that it ended up quite well. I hope it ended up quite well because I tried to give him the best I've got inside me, and I know that I'm not the only one because there was a bunch of writers working on Jackie, and I'm really proud of what we did here.
Totally. I think you all should be. I would love to get into your background specifically too, because I know you already mentioned that you'd written a couple of novels. I think you've also written some short stories. How did you get into video game writing? Was that something that you always wanted to do? I'm just curious how that kind of worked out for you.
To be absolutely honest, I always like from the I always knew that I wanted to be a writer, and I always wanted to write novels. Like I was a huge reader. Like I am a huge reader. Once I discovered reading, it just clicked. It is the thing for me, and I wanted to write books as well. Although I think I was quite humble because I understood that it's not given that people will like what you're gonna write. So I always thought that you need to have a backup plan in terms like your things. And I think that's quite weird that being like 8 or 10, I have this way of thinking. But for me, it turned out that quite early, I also discovered computers. I knew that I'm good with them. I even thought initially I'm going to become a programmer, but it didn't end up that way. Like I went all the way, like all into writing. I studied journalism, so like for the whole life I was writing something. Either it was based on fact or pieces of fiction. And I remember at one point someone made me realize that you can connect it because with the possibilities in the game industry, like you can become a professional writer and just write for games. And I loved games. I played many games, and like I was always a gamer from the very beginning. Also a reader and hopefully a writer. I was in the process of finishing my first novel when I sent my CV to the CD PROJEKT RED. So it all clicked. It all clicked basically that you can connect the craft you work on with the video games. And because there are many similarities. Like you need to know how to write a good story to become a story writer in a game industry. So thankfully that worked out as something that served well for the job.
And yeah, I know you mentioned that you have a background in some background in programming. How important is it to have a really good understanding of the technical aspects of game development when you're working in the story department?
I'm tempted to say not at all, but it's not entirely true. When you want to become a writer, you just need to understand video games. Like there is no technical knowledge involved. You need to understand that games are interactive, and you need to understand how games are different from books and how they are different from movies or whatever media you come from. But this is it. Like the technical aspect of it comes later. So you can learn as you go. So it's not as important to understand the difficulties that come with the game engine, the what are the limits of specific systems that you just cannot do. If I would even say that it's better if you don't know that, because if you don't know that something cannot be done, sometimes you just do it, and it turns out it can be done. So I think first and foremost you need to be a good writer, and then comes the rest.
And for any young aspiring writers out there who want to get into video game writing, do you have any advice or maybe recommendations for how to kind of get started in that new field?
I actually do, because many people ask me this question, and I always say you need to write and you need to finish stuff. I know that's quite simple, but I found that people think that, for example, writing for video games doesn't require as much craftsmanship in terms of writing. It does. So you need to understand the principles of of writing, how to write a good story, how to prepare a good character arc, story arc. So basically, it's more important to be a good writer than be proficient with video games. Even like if I were to balance, it's great to be proficient with video games. You understand what the medium you're writing for and what are the challenges here. But if you're a good writer, you're a good writer, and this is the most important thing. And in order to be a good writer, you need to write and you need to finish your stuff, because many people write a lot of things, but they do not finish. And it's tricky, but finishing stuff teaches you things about structure. The finished idea, is either it's a novel or a short story, it doesn't matter that much, but it shows you how well you can work with the structure of Usman. But it's obvious, but beginning, middle part, and the end, like those parts need to connect and correspond with each other. And cool idea and great style, it's not like it's a good basis, but it's not enough. I've met many people who had great style and tons of ideas, but they couldn't put it into something which has beginning, middle, and the end. I've even read stories by some aspiring writers which had the middle and the end, but no beginning. Well, they started somewhere, but structurally there was no beginning, and it applies to the. I even read the parts without the middle part. Like I saw the story that structurally it was beginning and the end, and there was no middle part, because you don't know what you're doing. So my advice is, yeah, learn the craft. Try to be as try to level up in writing, write stuff and finish it, and consume pop culture and culture. Read tons of books and analyze them consciously, because just consuming pop culture or culture is not enough. Like you need to understand why you're doing so and why those things actually work. Like why do you cry when character is dying? Like you never cry because of the scene. Like of course there's music, there's lighting, there's all that stuff, but I also often recommend an experiment. Take your favorite movie that touches you the most and watch the scene that touches you the most without context, and then suddenly it's not there. Then you make a pause and you ask yourself, why does it work? It works because for the last half an hour that was the best friend you had, or the person that you would love to be in love with, and this is why you are touched by their death or betrayal or whatever it is. And you need to understand how those things in the previous hour work for the scene you're looking for. So it's never about the scene, it's always about the things around that's gonna add up to the final effect. So this is the example of consciously deconstructing stuff that you consume, you watch or read or whatever, and then trying to put it into making on your own.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's great advice. Just two more questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So are there any specific authors or books that really resonate with you that kind of inform your writing, or maybe something that really helped you on this particular project, or just maybe in the cyberpunk genre in general that really kind of helped inform what you were trying to accomplish?
That's also a tricky question, because I'm there. Like within the company, we've got different types of fans of cyberpunk as a genre, and me personally, I think that cyberpunk is less about technology. I know how it sounds, but it's more about social dynamics and noir tropes and characters. So it's more important to understand, for example, that it's about the human flaws, as we talked before. It's more about the dark sides of human nature, and it's gonna be put into extreme situations by the context. And technology is what speeds things up. For example, this is why people in cyberpunk, some of them do, but most people don't live longer. They live faster. And by living faster means that you're gonna be expendable. This is what makes you like you are 30 and you're old, because you live so fast. And I think that this is what goes well with what William Gibson wrote, which was less about technology, more about people, and the change that technology brings out of people. I also love James Ellroy's novels, which are really dark and like they explore the dark sides of human nature. But this is my personal taste. Like this is I don't think this is something that was the something we used as a reading list for the project. Like me personally, I think that this is what inspires me the most, and the types of story we would like to tell, because it gives you a good glimpse of of difficult things that we want to touch upon, and then we filter it throughout this unique Cyberpunk 2077 style. So if you don't want to copy anyone, like in terms of style, in terms of art style, or how do you perceive technology, I think this is something which we are doing in a quite unique way, because this is retrofuturistic. Like, we do not try to give you a prediction of what's going to happen in the future. We give a commentary on the present things, and the style is unique and it's ours. But I find inspiration in people who grasp the dark parts of human nature as a writer personally, and then like this is what inspires me and gives me a good look into how it can be done superbly.
It's funny. We actually published both William Gibson and James Ellroy, and they're both still going strong. And one of my pipe dreams was to get we were trying to get William Gibson in to actually play Cyberpunk, to kind of just get his take on it and see, because I'm sure he has a very interesting lens with he views like the genre now as it's kind of aged throughout the years. And also James Ellroy, we wanted him to play LA Noire and see how that kind of. I'm sure he probably had strong opinions on that. I know he's not even very attuned to like modern technology, so that might have blown his mind. I don't know, but it'll be cool to get those things going. So, final question: looking ahead, technologically, in terms of like new hardware, this next generation of consoles and PCs, and all the different capabilities that are out there that are on the horizon. I'm curious, what are you excited about in the future in terms of how that affects how you develop your stories?
Wow. I don't know. Like, I might sound ignorant right now, but I try not to filter the way of storytelling through technology. Like, I concentrate so much on telling the best possible story that it's being chiseled later into whatever is possible and upgraded later. But I try not to extrapolate in that way. I think I'm old school in a way where the story comes first, and then whatever is available is being a great way of expressing that story. So it's not like I'm like consciously analyzing that in my head and trying to come up with something. I'm sorry.
No, that's all good. It makes sense. All right, well, Tomasz, thank you so much. You're very, very generous with your time. We really, really appreciate it. I think we got a lot of amazing information from you. So thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun.